Good day to our viewers on EBNet Stream. This is Leon Kralin in another of the series of exec meet and greets. I'm delighted today to be joined by Ann Leepile, the newly appointed CEO of M&G Investments. Ann, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Leon. It's lovely to be here.
First of all, congratulations. What a magnificent new role that you have, and an exceptionally important one of the largest asset management companies in South Africa. How does it feel to have been appointed the CEO?
Thank you on the congratulations. If you ask me, I don't consider us largest asset managers on that list. I think we are mid-sized with lots of room for growth and the ability to actually very quickly increase our footprint, if you ask me. So no, certainly not large, but it feels great. It's been a kind of baptism of fire just in moving to a new city. Feels like a whole new country, but the team has been very warm and welcoming, and I am really excited about the journey ahead.
So why do you choose to say medium rather than large? Is it because you think the large guys are too big?
I think the large guys are bigger than we are. And I think that if I consider us medium, it does speak to how much bigger I think we can get. I do think that there is nothing that precludes this business from becoming a 500 billion rand business in a kind of 3 to 5 year horizon if we make the right moves.
So, Anne, what is the total AUM at the moment for M&G in South Africa?
Just over 300, Leon. 300 billion.
The M&G assets, obviously, we're managing for South African pension funds, individuals, and so on. Do you also manage monies for across other African countries?
We manage, you mean in terms of the client landscape?
Yeah.
Yes, we do have some across other regions.
So what is your mandate then for your appointment and the vision that you have in terms of your tenure at M&G?
Yeah. So the mandate really is one of asset growth. I think that one would be quite clear. So it is to really increase the footprint of a business such as ours. You know, you said one of the largest asset managers. I think that London possibly believes that this business could get a lot bigger, and I think we have got the same view internally as well. So mandate very clear, asset growth, mandate very clear, talent retention, mandate very clear, brand growth as well.
Interestingly, M&G, I mean, I remember back to the days when Graham Mason, I think is the store your chair, came to visit us at Alex Forbes back in the mid-90s. And he was told, I won't mention names, but he was told by the actuary that headed up our investment consulting division that he should come back in 3 years when he had a track record, which I found interesting given that it was Prudential at the time and that business had a rather large track record or long track record. How do you see the dynamic between being part of this larger group that obviously would have expectations, but from a South African perspective, we are small relative to the rest of the world. Yet at the same time, M&G now is probably one of the few successes of a global asset manager coming to South Africa and persisting and being successful.
So I think we are fortunate in that we have got a very supportive global partner. There is a great and healthy relationship in terms of making sure that the distribution support capability is there. We've also got a very collaborative kind of investment process between our local and global teams. So that does make it a lot easier. I don't actually see any challenges in the offshore partnering. I think the fact that we have got the same brand as opposed to kind of a partnership agreement actually makes it a lot easier for us. And having a business the size of the London business really does assist. But at the same time, if I look at the local business on its own, it remains a very comfortable business as a standalone business, which makes it a lot easier in terms of garnering support from the offshore business.
So I said to you just before we began the recording that I wasn't going to ask any unfair questions. I hope this isn't an unfair question, but it's an interesting one because I'm sure, like yourself, we've analyzed and thought a lot about asset managers through our careers, and investment managers can tend to be a fairly dynamic animal, if I could put it that way. I remember studies around tribes within investment management companies and the dynamics between investment professionals, marketing professionals, administrators, and so on, and the importance of culture. We know that the culture within an asset management company is so important. Coming into a business like this that's well established as a new person, how do you see that, and how do you manage for that in order to, I suppose, maintain the culture and ultimately build on that culture in the context of also the vision and the mandate that you have?
So culture is obviously key in terms of the client experience, as well as the employee value proposition. So we kind of look at it in those two tranches. When it comes to staff, we have a setup, Leon, which I think is different to a number of asset managers in that all staff are equity shareholders in the business. That really then speaks to kind of we all win together and we all lose together. It assists in making people feel like we are really one team. But I think that culture is struggling across the industry post-COVID. And we've kind of got to get the guys back into the offices just so that they can feel like they are part of a single team. The older you are, the kind of more you appreciate the fact that there's certain things you just can't get off teams, Leon. So we are finding that actually we are spending a lot more time internally as a business. Obviously, as the outsider, I think that I have kind of brought I'm not going to say a breath of fresh air. I'll let the team decide whether that's a breath of fresh air or not, but I have brought a different type of energy. But the business itself it remains a small team. We don't have a large business, and it becomes very easy to kind of inculcate a uniform culture in a much smaller business. And maybe that's why I didn't join a 1,000+ business. I think this is a comfortable space to be. We have got the majority of our team sitting in the Claremont office. We do have a small office in Johannesburg. So sitting in one location does really help in kind of building who M&G is and what M&G does for its employees. On the client side, I do think that we have got some work to do in terms of spending more time with clients. We will be looking to kind of increase or improve the distribution footprint, so that the client experience is a more familiar one, as opposed to, we were Prudential, we are now M&G, and this is what we do. Having a kind of multifaceted business in terms of different asset class offerings has assisted, because you are able to have every conversation with a client, as opposed to you are purely a single asset class. That has helped us. But I do think that we have a long way to go in kind of being more in the client's face and in the client's mind when any need comes up.
How do you achieve that, though, these days? I mean, I've had similar debates within our business around the interactions and the relationships you can have, first of all, in an intermediated market where guys aren't in offices. The days of going to visit and walking around and bumping into a number of people and saying hello and having a conversation off the bat kind of thing, they're gone, because they're all sitting in their own homes all over the place. But even from an institutional perspective, trustee meetings are all happening online.
Yeah.
So how challenging is that in your mind?
I think one has had to then pivot away from, the traditional pitch decks of this is who M&G is, this is our product offering, and this is our performance, take it or leave it. We're kind of really having to get into the client's mind before you go meet the client, understand the client need. So hence, I think it does increase your need for capacity when it comes to client servicing. You need to know your client before you open the Teams meeting. You have to understand that clients are different. Clients have got different requirements. So, historically, when we were kind of much younger in the industry, you kind of had the same deck that you would put out on roadshow. I think that those days are over. And I think clients, rightfully so, are a lot more demanding these days of, but this doesn't speak to me, this doesn't work for me, and what is it that you are doing to kind of service and serve my needs? So we are doing a lot more work in the background before we kind of go on client engagements, just to make sure that we understand the space in which we are talking to.
Okay, so I'm going to take you down a bit of a path now of testing your memory, but I'm going to start. And make it easy for you. So go back one step. So you've come from a multi-manager um, uh, background, if I could call it that. How different is it, and why do you think we're finding more and more people moving from a multi-manager background into, they call it, single investment management space?
I'm not going to talk for others, I'll talk for myself. I live and breathe the markets, and I have always had a passion for investments. So this for me feels like a natural home, if you want to ask for my specific experience. And I think that I haven't looked at it as multi-manager versus single manager. I've looked at it as, where do I think that the greatest growth can come from in industry? I think that M&G is a business that has got lots of room for growth. And that's why I made the move from multi-manager to single manager. And I think that it's also the place where I feel like I'm more directly responsible for client outcomes. And it's a lot easier to be responsible for that in a single manager space without kind of then saying, oh, but this manager didn't do this, even though this manager did that. This feels a little bit more able to impact more directly. And it's kind of what speaks to me personally.
But it's interesting to hear you talking, or you quite quickly go to the client side of it, and I think that is because of that background as well. I mean, that's the world that we were brought up in, and it was always about, we were closer to the client, if I could put it that way. So I think that's valuable for any investment management company, that mindset in that. But you started off your career, was it RMB?
I did. I started, no, actually not at JP Morgan. I started in investment banking. So I started at JP Morgan and spent the first 2 years of my career in horribly weathered London, and decided that it just was not working for me. I really missed the sun. And I, more importantly, actually missed the ability to kind of make an impact. You know, when you kind of have your first foray into the working world in a highly developed economy, you learn a lot, but it really does very quickly kind of feel like a bit of a well-oiled machine, whereas South Africa at the time, I think, had so much room for growth. Hedge funds were kind of starting out in the industry. There was just so much change, and I felt like I was going to better be able to show impact in a market such as South Africa, and that's why I opted to move back.
And when you came back, you went to RMB, is that correct?
When I came back, I went to RMB.
And the role that you had there was focused on?
So at RMB, that is when I then was portfolio manager for a fund that was actually one of the first buyers of hedge funds in South Africa. And that was really interesting because it's such a pity that actually I don't think the hedge fund industry has gotten much bigger from back in those days. You know, it's kind of moved around the same type of asset size, but it was a really nice time to get into that space, understanding what the global market, I suppose, had been seeing for a while. But it was the first time kind of the South African institutional investor had started introducing themselves to hedge funds. I also kind of dabbled at the time in currency, which was really interesting. You soon learn not to chase currency tails in South Africa, but that was a great learning ground.
So you then pivoted, and I don't know if you would call your role at ABSA multi-management, but you were doing research and so on in that space. So that's a little bit more removed than being involved with the market. So how did that happen? Was it conscious? Did you just land there in some way as you were moving? Was it just inquisitiveness to try to learn other things? How does that come about? Because you're sort of gone there and now you're coming back a little bit in that direction.
Yeah, so I then at the time actually went to Investment Solutions as head of global manager research. And that was really for the global exposure. I'd kind of felt like, I'm really liking the South African asset manager landscape, but I had no exposure at the time to global managers. And I then spent 6 years kind of looking at the total asset manager landscape across the world. You actually very quickly appreciate just how amazing the South African manager landscape is. At the time, global was a much smaller portion of kind of Reg 28 allowances. I think at the time it was 20%, if not sub 20%. I can't remember, it was quite a while ago. But it meant that there was lots of room for growth in the local asset manager landscape. But at 20%, it was significant enough that it kind of warranted proper focus on what was happening offshore at the time as well. So spent 6 years at Investment Solutions, and then went back into single asset manager at Absa Asset Management for another 5 years after that.
Okay. But also what's interesting is you have stuck it out, if I could put it that way, in the places that you worked. You spent a bit of time there, which is unique these days. Whenever I see CVs, it's all over the place, jump, jump, jump. And you really have put the hard yards in. Again, is that a conscious thing from that you've had in your own head? Because I'm asking the question from the perspective of others learning from people that have had success, and I've noticed that on your CV, which I think is a good trait.
Thanks, Leon. So, I mean, I suppose maybe the question has to be, how much value do you believe you can kind of deliver to anything in the first 6 months, right? It kind of feels like it's more a process of osmosis at that point where you're just taking in what the environment is. So, it's always been, at what point do you actually feel like you are able to effect change? And for me, it's kind of always maybe after at least a year. ABSA was a particularly interesting time, given the fact that within the first 2 years of running the business, ABSA had announced to the market that they were, as part of their group strategy, kind of moving out of investment management businesses, and to kind of run a business for a further 3 years at that point with an M&A transaction looming was a real challenge. But actually, the issue is, what did you learn from it? You learn resilience. You learn how to stay the course and to kind of keep clients and staff with you through a very trying time. And honestly, credit to the team. I think I worked with an amazing team, and we really did kind of keep it together and continue to actually grow the business in that type of environment. So it's always about, are you still learning from an environment before you move on? And I think if you do still feel like there is room for you to grow, then there's no need to move on.
How's Cape Town accepted you? I always hear these stories that Joburgers can never make friends in Cape Town.
So I have enjoyed it a little bit more than I thought I would, Leon, to be honest with you. The wind is something else. I'm still adjusting to the wind, I must say. We have spent a lot of our weekends kind of just getting to know the city. The people are interesting. Somebody said the best time to move to Cape Town is when you've got young children, because you are forced to kind of meet friends' parents. So maybe that's been helpful. I think that having come from the background I've got, I have managed to at least make a lot of fellow industry friends, which has really assisted. Some of them have offered me even where to do my hair, where to get the girls involved in dance classes and things like that. So that's really helped. I have been very welcome. The team at M&G have been supremely welcoming of me, which has really helped. And that has made me feel very welcome, I must say. We've enjoyed Cape Town.
Well, look, I'm very pleased to hear that, and it was tongue in cheek. I'm sure you will make many friends. I do, however, want to check in with you in around about mid-June, after 17 days of rain, given what you said about London, and there's the bitterness of the cold that can happen in Cape Town. I'm just putting in a good word for Joburg, because I feel I have a responsibility.
I have a child at school in Johannesburg, and I will use every possible excuse to go see him on the weekends in the winter just to get some Joburg sun. I promise you that much.
Good. And final question, or maybe second final question, for people listening to this interview, and ultimately South Africa, there's a challenge. There's a lot of joblessness. Having a job is it's a privilege at the end of the day, given our circumstances. And everyone's ambitious. The younger generation wants to also, do well for themselves, build their families, and so on. What's the best advice that you can give them? I mean, I always talk about, to my children at least, about once you learn from your experiences. They don't believe me. They think they know it all. But there's what have you learned over time that has stood you in good stead as you've developed your career?
Yeah, and I think the toughest lessons are the best lessons. But when you are going through them, you really don't see past them. I do think that in all my instances where I have thought, so how do I lead? I've led by kind of experiencing maybe situations where I thought, okay, that wasn't great leadership. That's what I'm going to go out of my way to not do. How have I kind of managed my career? I've watched people who I believe, geez, I would have done that somewhat differently. And then I kind of think, okay, that's what I don't want to do. So hence I say, it's the toughest experiences that I think have shaped me into the individual I am today. I sometimes do feel like our young people are a little bit less resilient than is needed in an industry such as ours, which can be tough. It can be tough. You've got to stay the course. The study requisites are difficult. Get through the CFAs, get through the CMAs, get through whatever it is you have committed to doing. Get through all that, but also just be prepared to put in the time and the hours. And I promise you, the results do eventually come through, but you have to be prepared to kind of go through the trenches like we did. This is not to say you must be abused, but it's not a smooth sailing ride for any one of us. But yes, in a nutshell, the toughest lessons for me have been the best lessons.
So I want to end it there, because I think what I love about that answer is there's no substitute for hard work. And that's what I learned over time as well. I share that totally. And sometimes I think that's missed. And I think there's so much to be taken from that. Just put in the hard yards and let everything else take care of itself. And again, congratulations from everyone at EBNet Stream and all of our viewers. We wish you the very best in your role. M&G is a fantastic business, and we hope to see much success going forward over time and under your stewardship as well. So thank you for joining us. It's much appreciated, and all the best for the future.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was lovely chatting to you.
This is Leon Kralen for EBNet Stream.